Let's talk about one of the most underestimated tools inside n8n, the HTTP request node. When most people see it, they think of one thing. They say, oh, that's the node you use when you want to call an API. And sure, they're right. At the most basic level, that's exactly what it does. But stopping there means missing out on some of the most powerful ways to use it. So in this session, I want to walk you through 5 top use cases for the HTTP request node that go far beyond just making a plain API call. Think of this as a little tour of hidden superpowers. And to make it easy to follow, we'll do it node by node, almost as if we're stepping through a workflow together. Use case 1, triggering other workflows and platforms. Let's start with something that might not be obvious. The HTTP request node can be used as a trigger, not in the same way as a webhook node, but in the sense that you can send data out to kick off another workflow, either inside n8n itself or even in another automation platform. Imagine you have one big master workflow that organizes your data. Once it's done, you want another specialized workflow to take over. Instead of manually connecting everything together, you can use the HTTP request node to post data directly into another webhook URL. That second workflow wakes up, grabs the payload, and keeps going. In practice, this means you can chain multiple workflows together, almost like Lego blocks. Each one handles a different part of your process, and the HTTP request node is the connector piece between them. And it doesn't stop at n8n. Maybe you want to wake up a make.com scenario, or send something into Zapier for a teammate who only knows that tool. The HTTP request node becomes your universal bridge. Use case 2, file handling and media fetching. Now let's move to a second use case, one that's surprisingly practical. The HTTP request node isn't only about sending data, it's also about fetching files. For example, suppose you need to grab an image from a URL, or maybe you want to download a PDF report generated by another system. The node can handle this directly. It can pull in the binary file, store it temporarily inside the workflow, and then pass it along to whatever comes next. That means you can create flows like this. Fetch an image, strip metadata, upload it to cloud storage, and then send the cleaned up link into Airtable, all powered by that same little node. And it's not just media files. You could download CSVs, scrape XML feeds, or fetch log files from a remote server. Once the HTTP request node has them, the rest of your workflow can process them however you want. So the second big takeaway is, don't think of the node only as a messenger. Think of it as your downloader, your fetcher, your personal file grabber. Use case 3, batching and rate limiting. Next, let's talk about a third use case, and this one is crucial when dealing with scale. If you've ever worked with APIs that have rate limits, you know the pain. Send too many requests too quickly, and suddenly the service blocks you. That's where the HTTP request node shines with its batching and rate limiting options. You can tell it, send one request every 3 seconds, or only send 5 requests at a time. This turns the node into a built-in throttle, protecting you from hitting limits and making sure your automations stay healthy. Picture this. You split out a list of prompts or a list of company names, and now you want to send each one through an image generation API. Without batching, you'd spam the service. With batching, you control the rhythm. It feels like having cruise control for your workflow. You set the pace once, and the node takes care of the rest. So the third big use case is taming chaotic bulk operations by using built-in batching. Use case 4, flexible response handling. For the fourth use case, let's flip the perspective. We've talked about sending data out and fetching files in, but what about handling what comes back? The HTTP request node gives you a lot of control over the response. You can decide whether you want the data as JSON, as raw text, or even as binary. And more importantly, you can shape the workflow so it reacts differently based on the response. For example, suppose you're pinging a service, and you want to know if it returns a 200, a 404, or a 500. You can design branches in your workflow that say, if 200, process the data. If 404, log the error or send an alert. If 500, retry later. That kind of fine-grained control turns the HTTP request node into more than just a dumb pipe. It becomes your decision maker, your traffic controller. So the fourth key point is, the node can interpret, structure, and route based on responses, not just blindly pass them through. Use case 5, acting as a glue layer between systems. Finally, let's talk about the fifth use case. The HTTP request node often acts as glue between tools that weren't designed to talk to each other. Maybe one service only exposes a simple webhook. Another service expects data in a slightly different shape. Instead of building a custom integration, you can use the HTTP request node to bridge the gap. For example, let's say you have a list of firms stored in Airtable, and you want to send that list to a third-party API that doesn't natively integrate with Airtable. You can use the HTTP request node to reformat and deliver that payload, exactly the way the API expects. Or maybe you want to enrich the data first, fetch metadata, attach files, or wrap it in additional fields before you send it on. Again, the node gives you that flexibility. It's like having duct tape inside your toolkit. Anytime two platforms don't quite fit together, you wrap the gap with an HTTP request node, and suddenly the flow works, bringing it all together. So let's recap. The HTTP request node is much more than a way to call an API. First, it can trigger other workflows and platforms, letting you chain together automations across tools. Second, it can fetch files and media, becoming your downloader for anything from images to CSVs. Third, it has batching and rate limiting to handle bulk jobs without breaking limits. Fourth, it can flexibly handle responses, branching your workflow based on success, failure, or even specific data inside the payload. And fifth, it serves as glue between systems, reshaping and delivering data wherever it needs to go. Once you start seeing these use cases, you realize the HTTP request node is not just one node among many. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife for your automations. It fills in gaps, bridges workflows, and gives you fine-grained control over how your data moves across the web. And that's why, in practice, you'll see advanced n8n users dropping this node into their workflows again and again. It might not look flashy, but it's the secret workhorse behind some of the most creative automations. So next time you're inside n8n, don't just think of the HTTP request node as the API caller. Think of it as your connector, your file fetcher, your batch processor, your response interpreter, and your glue layer. Because once you unlock those 5 use cases, the way you design workflows will never look the same again.